Cybersecurity is not a matter of, your email being hacked anymore. It's affecting our infrastructure. It's affecting our healthcare, food cycle, international trade.
Welcome to the Knowledge Archives podcast. We're a group of students on a mission to learn from as many different disciplines of knowledge as possible. I'm your host, Madhav Malhotra, and today I'm glad to be joined by Dr. Feras Batarseh, an associate professor of biological systems engineering at Virginia Tech. He researches the increasing concerns for creating safe applications of AI, especially in the context of agricultural and drinking water production. Today, he explains the increasingly connected risks created by cybersecurity, biosecurity, and AI. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I'm very excited to dive into more technical details and case studies of the risks we're talking about. But before we dive into those details, would you mind telling me a bit more about yourself and your role in this field?
Yes, hi, and thank you for having me. I'm Feras Batarseh. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Biological Systems Engineering at Virginia Tech. BAC is at the intersection of the College of Engineering and the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at our university. The focus of my team's research at Virginia Tech is on applying AI, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity solutions to address critical needs in the agricultural and water sectors. And so my background is in artificial intelligence. My research has been in AI, but with more interactions with users, producers, farmers, there's an increased realization that the need for securing those critical infrastructures from a business perspective, it's very important to maintain profits and businesses and supply chains and so on. But also from a national interest perspective, it's a national security concern. Many countries around the world are focusing on this field and increasingly putting investments, research, resources, and deployment resources at this field. So this caused, our team and to focus more on this field and work with water operators and water treatment facilities, large farms, medium-sized farms, and small farms across the state and the nation to identify issues where AI and cyber solutions could be useful.
So already, we have these terms flying around. What is an example of some part of the water treatment or food production sector where there could be a cybersecurity risk, and how do these two fields interact with that particular example?
Right. That's a good question, Madav. So the recent studies show that the average time it takes any institution, especially in the bio domains like agriculture, biolabs, healthcare, right, and so on, it takes them 21 days on average to realize that they have been compromised. Now, when I say compromised, I think most of your listeners would note to the term, hacked, or they would be familiar with the term being hacked. In cybersecurity, we categorize the threats into multiple groups, and not all attacks or threats are created equal. The most common form of attack is ransomware, where the adversary, whether that's a state or a non-state adversary, is compromising the system and asking for money in return, asking for a ransom, right? That's the most common. More than 7% of cases are driven by a ransom. The other cases where you have phishing attacks, we have hacking, those are different categories, right, that require dealing with the challenge in a different manner. And so when it comes to being compromised, most companies at this point in time have a challenge not only protecting their data and their systems, but also knowing that they have been compromised to begin with, right? Hackers are getting increasingly advanced where they get into a system, They stay there for days and weeks and months sometimes, listening into all the transactions, all the emails, all the processes, all the critical information, and then creating damage as they either leave or not at all, even just stay there for months, in many recent occasions. And I'll give you an example. JBS, one of the big slaughterhouses in the US for beef, cattle, pork, and so on, had their infrastructure compromised, causing millions of dollars loss, right, for the business. But the danger here also lies in other systems that depend on that system. For example, in the JBS case, their meat, chicken, pork, beef production, slaughter, and supply chains were halted, stopped for days in the US. And you can only imagine what that causes to retail, what that causes to restaurants, what that causes to cattle, for instance, being frozen in freezers and shipped across the border and being stuck at ports all over the world. As you know, the US is one of the biggest producers of livestock in the world, and there's a lot of import and export movement around that. So when a compromise like that happens to one of the biggest companies, it can really paralyze the entire process, and it can paralyze and create a wave of interdependencies, right? Interdependencies and intradependencies are two concepts in cybersecurity that point to the fact that when you're compromised, your physical systems are also compromised, and your biological systems could be compromised. Let's say you're a hospital and your networks has been compromised. You can think of your patient data being affected, and if someone has access to editing patient data in ways that are unwarranted, that could also lead to health implications for patients, right? It could lead to putting the patient's lives at danger. And so cybersecurity is not a matter of your email being hacked anymore or your social media being hacked anymore. It's really much more than that. It's affecting our infrastructure. It's affecting our, like I mentioned, healthcare, food cycle, trade, international trade, every aspect of our economy and industry and academia and government, right? There has been many cases where the US government has been, unfortunately, a victim of multiple hacks by external players. The usual suspects from a US perspective, are China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and so on. But it's difficult to obviously identify the source of attacks in most cases. So that claim is always taken with a grain of salt. But it's also important to know that attackers could be state or could be non-state, could be in many cases a teenager, right? Someone who's interested in trying to crack, some code and try to get into some system. It could be sometimes some unhappy employee at a company that wants to cause and inflict damage to that company, and so on and so forth. So it's really the scope is only widening and becoming more difficult to contain, which again raises the need for more focus on this field.
Already you've shown the complexity that's involved with not just the cybersecurity, but how does it affect our food supply chains? How does it affect our hospitals? But to make it even more complicated, to focus in on your work, you're looking at how AI is affecting, already this hugely diverse topic. So could you talk to us about how AI has created both risks and benefits?
Right. That's a very good point. So the power AI for cybersecurity is that artificial intelligence can identify patterns in data and in networks that a human is not able to identify. Not because AI could be built in ways that are, more intelligent than humans, but because with the increased size of data, a human operator is not able to constantly, at every second of the day, and within every dimension and scope of their organization, to keep looking for outliers and to keep looking for areas where there's a unusual activity, right? The challenge here is that unusual activities could be an intentional attack by an external adversary, or it could be an unintentional mistake. For instance, we've seen a lot of cases where, at a water treatment plant, you have In many cases, we found that like a plastic bag is covering the sensor and it's leading to a change in the readings. And if you're looking at it from a distance, you can think that, oh, this sensor looks, not too functional and it could qualify as an attack. But AI has the ability to classify that to, intentional attacks, non-intentional attacks. This looks like a hacker. This looks like a hacker. This looks like someone with bad intentions. This looks like a plastic bag. This looks like, AI, if with enough data, can have that ability. And one of the promising areas of the sixth generation of telecommunications is that it's going to have AI built into some of its protocols to identify such issues. One, to maximize the usage of data in ways that are beneficial to the application. And two, be able to also identify issues like security threats and so on. But you asked about the downsides as well. And I applaud you for that, because with AI, there has been a rising concern when it comes to data ownership, when it comes to ethical components, and how countries are dealing with such issues. My team at Virginia Tech, we focus on AI deployments and specifically on the assurance of AI systems. We recently published a book that's titled AI Assurance. And by assurance, we mean really your question: AI fairness, ethical AI, secure AI, safe AI, explainable AI. So, there's multiple areas when AI is being applied. Many have warned against AI's unexplainability, or as AI provides recommendations in many cases, how do I know that the recommendations that are being provided are trustworthy? So, from an ethical perspective as well, it's important to note that most countries now collect data and use AI for public policy making. However, it's a rising concern to discussing data ownership by citizens, right? So in our previous book, we called it Data Democracy, where we discuss a concept called the Data Republic. We have proposed that citizens of a data republic, as we are all right now, we have a citizenship with our countries, but we also have presence virtually, right? And with the increase of metaverse and all the other technologies, right, we're only going to have more presence virtually. So the question then becomes is, who owns that data? Who owns any picture that we send online? Who owns any text message that you ship across the networks? Is it the receiver? Is it the sender? Is it the country? Is it, as technology has no borders, geographical borders don't make any sense when it comes to data or when it comes to AI. And if AI is the collective knowledge that we all as humans are creating, then how are we defining those royalties and those ownerships? I'm sure, many countries are trying to create laws and policies that are related to AI, but it's been a rising challenge, especially if you think about cases where, you have kids using cell phones and you have teenagers using applications. And, I always joke in my class, if you have TikTok on your phone, you don't have the right to ask for security, because you're basically creating a backdoor on your cell phone, and you're asking to be, compromised in so many ways, right? So there has to be more awareness, so that there has to be more, push against lack of ownership, and also push for policymakers and lawmakers all over the world in all countries, craft rules and regulations that guarantee the freedoms and the security of citizens when it comes to their presence in the virtual world.
So right now, we already have these issues, but in the next 5 years, could you list what problems, like specific problems that you're thinking about?
Right. Yeah. So a look to the future, if you will. I'll begin with a more pessimistic note and then end up with a more optimistic note. So it's looking more obvious that the wars of the future and the conflicts of the future are going to be cyber wars, are going to be data wars, as the famous saying, data is the new oil. And we see many countries creating cyber armies. In all conflicts today, the conflict begins with a set of cyber attacks before there's an actual physical attack. And that's obviously only going to increase in the next upcoming years, which would mean that AI is more important than ever in identifying bad players and identifying adversaries that break the law, international law. However, at the same time, we can see that AI is helping save lives in hospitals. AI is helping improving our experiences with e-commerce, improving our ownership, increasing our communication with people we care about all over the world. And so just like any other, technology that humans ever created, there's a pro and a con. It's a double-edged sword. And besides the continuous advancement in technologies, the call for improved laws and ethics surrounding those technologies, I think, is also another major component is on the rise. In agriculture, we see an increased dependency on cyber and on AI, and that's great because that we can identify better nutrients and provide better food to the world, right? And that's obviously a great thing. But at the same time, with cases like water, there has been incidents where water could be poisoned through cyber attacks and AI. So both the pros and the cons will continue to be hand in hand, and it's an everlasting race. And my team and I and all of us at Virginia Tech, we hope to be a force for increasing the pros and reducing the disadvantages in those technologies. And I invite you and all your listeners to join us in this pursuit.
That's a great call to action to end on, and I'll definitely make sure to link to your lab sites and your publications in the details so that people can learn more. But I want to thank you for taking on the challenge of guiding us through the most simple basics to these huge questions that increasingly everyone in our society will have to start thinking about. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much. I enjoyed it, and I appreciate your hosting this podcast. Thanks so much.